One Christmas was so much like the other in those years around the Seatown corner now, out of all sound except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down towards the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged, fish-freezing waves, and I plunge my hands in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white, bell-tongued ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December, in my memory, as white as Lapland, although there were no reindeers. But there were cats, patient, cold, and callous, our hands wrapped in socks. We waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible-whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slide and sidle over the white back garden walls, and the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasined trappers from Hudson Bay off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms towards the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombilating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house laden with snowballs and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas," and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "They won't be here," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said, and we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said, "and the ambulance. And Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the fireman turned off the hose and was standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing, always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales and birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons, in damp front farmhouse parlours, and we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the bears. Before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and it snowed. But here a small boy says, "It snowed last year, too. I made a snowman, and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." But that was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewashed buckets down the sky. It came shoaling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure and grandfather moss, minutely ivied the walls and settled on the postman opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then, too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses on spread, frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of bells. You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang? I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them. I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells, too. Inside them? No, in the bat-black, snow-white belfries tugged by bishops and storks. And they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postmen. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and the snow. They knocked on the doors with blue knuckles. Ours has got a black knocker. And then they stood on the white welcome mat in the little drifted porches and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents, and then the presents after the Christmas box. And the cold postman with a rose on his button nose tingled down the tea-tray slithered run of the chilly, glinting hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God he was gone. Get back to the presents. There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarves of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-o-war down to the galoshes, blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes. From aunts who always wore wool next to the skin, there were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose-bag from an aunt now, alas, no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles's pond and did and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp, except why. Go on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, and a folded flag and a false nose and a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a catapult. Once, by a mistake that no one could explain, a little hatchet. And a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow. And a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color I please. And still the dazzling sky-blue sheep are grazing in the red field under the rainbow-billed and pea-green birds. Hard-boileds, toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, cracknel, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan, and butter Welsh for the Welsh. And troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run. And snakes and families and happy ladders and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions, Oh, easy for Leonardo. And a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up the old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick, to shake our picture off the wall. And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth, and you stood at the corner of the street, and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette, and then, with a smirk, you ate it. And then it was breakfast under the balloons. Were there uncles like in our house? There are always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles. And on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the swathed town for the news of the little world, and find always a dead bird by the post office or the white deserted swings. Perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Men and women wading, scooping back from chapel with taproom noses and wind-busked cheeks, all albinos, huddled their stiff black jarring feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. There was sherry and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons, and cats in their furabouts watched the fires, and the high-heaped fires spat, all ready for the chestnuts and the mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors without their collars, uncles almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen, nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers. Not many those mornings trod the piling streets. An old man, always fawn-bowlered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the white bowling green, and back as he would take it wet or fire or on Christmas Day or Doomsday. Sometimes two hale young men with big pipes blazing, no overcoats and wind-blown scarves, would trudge unspeaking down to the forlorn sea to work up an appetite to blow away the fumes, who knows, to walk into the waves until nothing of them was left but the two curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. Then I would be slap-dashing home, the gravy smell of the dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding and mince coiling up to my nostrils, when out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy the spit of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and the violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violet wink, put his whistle to his lips, and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces that cheek bulged with goose would press against their tinselled windows the whole length of the white echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all buttons, put their large, moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, and sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing tureens. Aunt Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dossie had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowbound backyard, singing like a big-bosomed thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to, and then when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending, I would sit among festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man-of-war following the instructions for little engineers and produce what might be mistaken for a sea-going tramcar. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking into the white world, onto the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints on the hidden pavements. I bet people will think there have been hippos. What would you do if we saw a hippo coming down our street? I'd go like this, bang! I'd throw him over the railings and roll him down the hill, and then I'd tickle him under the ear and he'd wag his tail. What would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron-flanked and bellowing he-hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow towards us as we passed Mr. Daniel's house. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Let's write things in the snow. Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over his lawn. Or we walked on the white shore. Can the fishes see it snowing? The silent, one-clouded heavens drifted onto the sea. Now we were snow-blind travelers lost on the north hills, and vast dew-lapped dogs with flasks round their necks ambled and shambled up to us, baying Excelsior. We returned home through the poor streets, where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow, and cat-called after us, their voices fading away as we trudged uphill into the cries of the dock birds and the hooting of ships out in the whirling bay. And then at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly, and the ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum, because it was only once a year. Bring out the tall tales now, that we told by the fire as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts wooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once, when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house. And we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand, in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas, I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3, and we began to sing, our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas last looked out on the feast of Stephen. And then a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door. A small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. The front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said. And we did that. Always on Christmas night there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again, and then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill and hear the music rising from them up the long, steadily falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes. And honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time my lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman, the calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hay fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and playing, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm like a wanderer white with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden, the sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced through the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. So gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Brave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Through throats where many rivers meet, the curlews cry, under the conceiving moon on the high chalk hill. And there this night I walk in the white giant's thigh, where barren as boulders women lie longing still to labor and love, though they lay down long ago. Through throats where many rivers meet, the women pray, pleading in the waded bay for the seed to flow, though the names on their weed-grown stones are rained away. And alone in the night's eternal curving act, they yearn with tongues of curlews for the unconceived and immemorial sons of the cudgeling hacked hill, who once in gooseskin winter loved all ice-leaved in the quarters lanes, or twined in the ox-roasting sun, in the wains tunned so high that the wisps of the hay clung to the pitching clouds, or gay with anyone young as they in the after-milking moonlight lay under the lighted shapes of faith and their moonshade petticoats galed high, or shy with the rough-riding boys. Now clasp me to their grains in the gigantic glade, who once green countries since were a hedgerow of joys. Time by, their dust was flesh the swineherd rooted sly, flared in the reek of the wiving sty with the rushlight of his thighs, spread eagle to the dunghill sky. Or with their orchard men in the core of the sun's bush, rough as cows' tongues and threshed with brambles their buttermilk manes, under his quenchless summer barbed gold to the bone, or rippling soft in the spinny moon as the silkened ducked and draped white lake that harps to a hailstone, who once were a bloom of wayside brides in the hoard house, and heard the lewd-wooed field flow to the coming frost, the scurrying furred small friars squeal in the dows of day, in the thistle isles, till the white owl crust their breast, the vaulting does roister, the horned bucks climb quick in the wood at love, where a torch of foxes foams. All birds and beasts of the linked night uproar and chime, and the mole snout blunt under his pilgrimage of domes. Or butterfat goose girls bounced in a gambo bed, their breasts full of honey, under their gander king trounced by his wings in the hissing shippen. Long dead and gone that barley dark, where their clogs danced in the spring, and their firefly hairpins flew, and the ricks ran round, but nothing bore. No mouthing babe to the veined hives hugged, and barren and bare on Mother Goose's ground, they with the simple jacks were a boulder of wives. Now curlew cry me down to kiss the mouths of their dust. The dust of their kettles and clocks swings to and fro, where the hay rides now or the bracken kitchens rust, as the arc of the billhooks that flashed the hedges low and cut the birds' boughs that the minstrel sap ran red. They from houses where the harvest boughs hold me hard, who heard the tall bell sail down the Sundays of the dead, and the rain ring out its tongues on the faded yard. Teach me the love that is evergreen after the fall-leaved grave, after beloved on the grass-gulfed crosses scrubbed off by the sun, and daughters no longer grieved, save by their long desirers in the fox-scubbed streets, or hungering in the crumbled wood. To these hail dead and deathless do the women of the hill love forever meridian through the quarter's trees, and the daughters of darkness flame like foxfires still. The boughs glided down, and the coast, blackened with birds, took a last look at his thrashing hair and whale-blue eye. The trodden town rang its cobbles for luck. Then goodbye to the fisherman boat with its anchor free and fast as a bird hooking over the sea, high and dry by the top of the mast, whispered the affectionate sand and the bulwarks of the dazzled quay. For my sake sail and never look back, said the looking land. Sails drank the wind, and white as milk he sped into the drinking dark. The sun shipwrecked west on a pearl, and the moon swam out of its hulk. Funnels and masts went by in a whirl. Goodbye to the man on the sea-legged deck, to the gold gut that sings on his reel, to the bait that stalked out of the sack. For we saw him throw to the swift flood a girl alive with his hooks through her lips. All the fishes were rayed in blood, said the dwindling ships. Goodbye to chimneys and funnels, old wives that spin in the smoke. He was blind to the eyes of candles in the praying windows of waves, but heard his bait buck in the wake and tussle in a shoal of loves. Now cast down your rod, for the whole of the sea is hilly with whales. She longs among horses and angels, the rainbow fish bend in her joys. Floated the lost cathedral chimes of the rocked boys. Where the anchor rode like a gull, miles over the moonstruck boat, a squall of birds bellowed and fell. A cloud blew the rain from its throat. He saw the storm smoke out to kill, with fuming bows and ram of ice. Fire on starlight rake Jesu's stream, and nothing shone on the water's face but the oil and bubble of the moon. Plunging and piercing in his course, the lured fish under the foam witnessed with a kiss. Whales in the wake like capes and alps quaked the sick sea and snouted deep. Deep the great bushed bait with raining lips slipped the fins of those humpbacked tons and fled their love in a weaving dip. Oh, Jericho was falling in their lungs. She nipped and dived in the nick of love, spun on a spout like a long-legged ball, till every beast blared down in a swerve, till every turtle crushed from his shell, till every bone in the scuttled grave rose and crowed and fell. Good luck to the hand on the rod, there is thunder under its thumbs. Gold gut is a lightning thread, his fiery reel sings off its flames. The world boat in the burn of his blood is crying from nets to knives. Oh, the sheer-water birds and their boat-sized brood, oh, the bulls of Biscay and their calves, are making under the green-laid veil the long-legged, beautiful bait, their wives. Break the black news and paint on a sail huge weddings in the waves. Over the wakeward flashing spray, over the gardens of the floor, clash out the mounting dolphin's day. My mast is a bell spire. Strike and smooth for my decks are drums. Sing through the water-spoken prow, the octopus walking into her limbs, the polar eagle with his tread of snow. From salt-lipped beak to the kick of the stern, sing how the seal has kissed her dead. The long-laid minute's bride drifts on, old in her cruel bed. Over the graveyard in the water, mountains and galleries beneath, nightingale and hyena rejoicing for their drifting death, sing and howl through sand and anemone, valley and Sahara in a shell. Oh, all the wanting flesh's enemy, thrown to the sea in the shell of a girl, is old as water and plain as an eel. Always goodbye to the long-legged bread scattered in the paths of his heels, for the salty birds fluttered and fed, and the tall grains foamed in their bills. Always goodbye to the fires of the face, for the crab-backed dead on the seabed rose and scuttled over her eyes. The blind, clawed stare is cold as sleet. The tempter under the eyelid, who shows to the selves asleep mast-high moon-white women naked, walking in wishes and lovely for shame, is dumb and gone with his flame of brides. Susanna's drowned in the bearded stream, and no one stirs at Sheba's side but the hungry kings of the tides. Sin, who had a woman's shape, sleep still silence blows on a cloud, and all the lifted waters walk and leap. Lucifer, that bird's dropping out of the sides of the north, has melted away and is lost, is always lost in her vaulted breath. Venus lies starstruck in her wound, and the sensual ruins make seasons over the liquid world, white springs in the dark. Always goodbye, cried the voices through the shell. Goodbye always, for the flesh is cast, and the fisherman winds his reel with no more desire than a ghost. Always good luck, praised the fin in the feather bird after dark, and the laughing fish, as the sails drank up the hail of thunder, and the long-tailed lightning lit his catch. The boat swims into the 6-year weather. A wind throws a shadow and it freezes fast. See what the gold gut drags from under, mountains and galleries to the crest. See what clings to hair and skull as the boat skims on with drinking wings. The statues of great rain stand still, and the flakes fall like hills. Sing and strike his heavy haul, toppling up the boatside in a snow of light. His decks are drenched with miracles. Oh, miracle of fishes, the long dead bite. Out of the urn the size of a man, out of the room the weight of his trouble, out of the house that holds a town in the continent of a fossil, one by one in dust and shawl, dry as echoes and insect-faced, his fathers cling to the hand of the girl, and the dead hand leads the past, leads them as children and as air onto the blindly tossing tops. The centuries throw back their hair, and the old men sing from newborn lips, time is bearing another son. Kill time, she turns in her pain. The oak is felled in the acorn, and the hawk in the egg kills the wren. He who blew the great fire in and died on a hiss of flames, or walked on the earth in the evening, counting the denials of the grains, clings to her drifting hair and climbs. And he who taught their lips to sing weeps like the risen sun among the liquid choirs of his tribes. The rod bends low, divining land, and through the sundered water crawls a garden holding to her hand, with birds and animals, with men and women and waterfalls, trees cool and dry in the whirlpool of ships. And stunned and still on the green laid vale, sand with legends in its virgin laps, and prophets loud on the burned dunes. Insects and valleys hold her thighs hard, times and places grip her breastbone. She is breaking with seasons and clouds. Round her trailed wrist fresh water weaves, with moving fish and rounded stones. Up and down the greater waves a separate river breathes and runs. Strike and sing his catch of fields, for the surge is sown with barley. The cattle graze on the covered foam, the hills have footed the waves away. With wild sea fillies and soaking bridles, with salty colts and gales in their limbs, all the horses of his hall of miracles gallop through the arched green farms, trot and gallop with gulls upon them and thunderbolts in their manes. O Rome and Sodom, tomorrow and London, the country tide is cobbled with towns, and steeples pierce the cloud on her shoulder, and the streets that the fisherman combed when his long-legged flesh was a wind on fire and his loin was a hunting flame, coil from the thoroughfares of her hair, and terribly lead him home alive, lead her prodigal home to his terror, the furious ox-killing house of love. Down, 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 under the ground, under the floating villages, turns the moon-chained and water-wound metropolis of fishes. There is nothing left of the sea but its sound. Under the earth the loud sea walks. In deathbeds of orchards the boat dies down, and the bait is drowned among hayricks. Land, 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 nothing remains of the pacing famous sea but its speech, and into its talkative 7 tombs the anchor dives through the floors of a church. Goodbye, good luck, struck the sun and the moon to the fisherman lost on the land. He stands alone at the door of his home, with his long-legged heart in his hand. Myself, the grievers, grieve among the street burned to tireless death, a child of a few hours with its kneading mouth charred on the black breast of the grave the mother dug, and its arms full of fires. Begin with singing, sing, darkness kindled back into beginning, when the court tongue nodded blind. A star was broken into the centuries of the child. My selves grieve now, and miracles cannot atone. Forgive us your death, that myselves, the believers, may hold it in a great flood till the blood shall spurt, and the dust shall sing like a bird as the grains blow, as your death grows through our hut. Crying your dying cry, child beyond cockcrow, by the fire-dwarfed street we chant the flying sea in the body bereft. Love is the last light spoken, O seed of sons in the loin of the black husk left. I know not whether Adam or Eve, the adorned holy bullock, or the white ewe lamb, or the chosen virgin laid in her snow on the altar of London, was the first to die in the cinder of the little skull. O bride and bridegroom, O Adam and Eve together, lying in the lull under the sad breast of the headstone, white as the skeleton of the Garden of Eden. I know the legend of Adam and Eve is never for a second silent in my service over the dead infants, over the one child who was priest and servants, word, singers, and tongue in the cinder of the little skull, who was the serpent's nightfall and the fruit like a sun, man and a woman undone, beginning crumbled back to darkness, bare as the nurseries of the garden of wilderness. Into the organ pipes and steeples of the luminous cathedrals, into the weathercock's molten mouths, rippling in 12-winded circles, into the dead clock burning the hour over the urn of Sabbaths, over the whirling ditch of daybreak, over the sun's hovel and the slum of fire, and the golden pavements laid in requiems, into the bread in a wheat field of flames, into the wine burning like brandy, the masses of the sea, the masses of the sea under the masses of the infant-bearing sea, erupt, fountain, and enter to utter forever glory, 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 the sundering ultimate kingdom of Genesis thunder.